10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 306. Hey everybody, welcome back to the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. This is episode 306. If you're new to the show, welcome in. And if you are one of our longtime returning listeners, welcome back. This is going to be the third part in our series about learning tunes. And today we're finally going to talk about the melody. We have already talked about some really useful chord progressions that you can learn before you learn specific tunes. And then we have also talked about learning the form by ear. And you guessed it, today we're going to talk about learning the melody by ear. But before we dive into the show, just wanted to remind everybody that this is a listener-supported podcast, which means we do not have any advertisements on the show. Instead, we rely on listeners just like you to support us by making a small monthly donation every month. And in return for that donation, you do get a PDF and audio examples with every single episode to keep your jazz education journey going each and every week with some helpful materials. Now, the platform that we use that allows you to support the show is the Patreon platform. Very easy to use, and you can find out more information and get all the instructions on signing up and getting instant access by going to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, clicking on one of the Patreon banners. Get yourself signed up today. We've got some brand new patrons this week. Wanted to give a quick shout out to Patrick and Joe for becoming brand new $5 patrons. Thank you so much for signing up, and to the over 350 members that we have over there supporting us. Thank you. You know that we cannot do this show without you. We really, really appreciate the support and hope you're getting something out of your membership. So again, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, get yourself signed up today. All right. So we are going to start talking about the ways that I believe are the best for learning melodies. Now, here's the thing about learning melodies today. It's never been easier to just Google the melody that you're trying to learn, PDF, and find something that's just going to serve the melody right up for you, right? Now, there is something to be said for that. If you need to learn a melody in a pinch, like for a gig that night or something like that, by all means, those resources are fantastic for doing something like that. But remember, our goal here is to learn information and become a student of jazz in such a way that things are going to stick. And one of the biggest things that we all have to do as jazz musicians is know a whole bunch of tunes. And most of the time that requires knowing the melody. Even if you are not a melodic instrument, like let's say you play bass, knowing the melody is going to give you huge advantages down the road, not to mention really inform your solos and never put you in a situation where you might have to play the melody and you don't know how, you don't know it. So learning the melody is an absolute essential. I don't care what instrument you play, you've got to know it. Now, the thing that I've learned over the years of learning a lot of different melodies is that if I do learn them off of paper, I don't retain them very well. There's just something about when I'm reading something with my eyes as opposed to synthesizing information with my ears, is that when I use my ears, it sticks. And when I use my eyes, I forget about it almost instantly. And of course, over the years, that's really been a theme with the show, right? We try to do as much by ear as possible. Hence, the last episode in this series, we're trying to learn the form by ear instead of opening up that real book and having it laid out right in front of us, right? So we're going to do the same thing with the melody. Now, there's a couple of things that we need to talk about. The first thing is, in my mind, there's two types of melodies. There's one type of melody where you play it exactly the same every time. So think about a tune like Recordame. That is a very, very specific melody where most of the time we're going to play it exactly like it's written on the page. Or a lot of those great Blue Note recordings where there's two horns playing the melody together at the same time in unison. Most of those melodies were very, very specific. Charlie Parker's melodies are extremely specific, and there's there's really not a lot of room for interpretation. So when we're learning those types of melodies, it's easy. We just listen, and then we learn it exactly how our favorite artists are playing it. And then when we actually play the tune in a real life situation, we just play it exactly the same way as we transcribed it. So there's a huge list of those tunes. There's hundreds of those kinds of tunes, and it'll be kind of up to you to listen to a lot of recordings and understand whether the melody was meant to be exactly the way that it was written, or whether it's open to a little bit of interpretation or not. So then the second type of tune is that situation where the tune is very, very much open to interpretation. Now, if you did look into a real book, these would be the melodies where you see a lot of quarter notes and half notes, where you know, or at least I hope you know, that when you open up to a tune that is literally comprised of, let's say, like 80% quarter notes, you're not supposed to just play quarter notes. And I think all of you out there that are taking the time to pay attention to this podcast and listen to what I'm telling you realize that, because you listen to a lot of jazz and you appreciate the fact that most of the artists that you're listening to are not just playing those plain old quarter notes. Now, this type of tune is actually much harder to learn by ear, because it really depends on what recording you're listening to, that you will hear a different interpretation of the artist that you are studying, that you are trying to learn the melody from. So we have to talk about how to synthesize these tunes by ear, and at the end of the day, kind of know the structure of the tune and what the melody actually is. So we're going to spend our time talking about that. If you want to go out and learn a bunch of Charlie Parker tunes, or really, really specific bebop tunes, or a lot of Thelonious Monk's tunes, for instance, are very, very specific, and there's not that much room for interpretation, we're going to talk about the ones that really are open, and how do we learn those and come away with some information at the end of the day and be able to recreate it in our own way. So the PDF this week for the Patreon members, I've listed a set of tunes that I actually want you to learn the melody to if you don't know them already. And I'm going to kind of talk about a strategy that I use to learn these particular tunes by ear. So we're going to use the tune Alone Together as an example. This is a tune that's very, very much open to interpretation. It's played at a lot of different tempos and a lot of different styles. So this is, like, in my mind, the perfect example of a tune like this. So here's the first step. What I want you to do first, before you do anything, is try to figure out your favorite version of this tune by the artist that you identify with the most, the one that you enjoy the most, okay? And what you're going to start by doing is you're going to start by learning that melody exactly how that artist plays it. You're going to learn their interpretation, note by note, phrase by phrase, articulation by articulation, okay? That's where you're going to start. Now, what you also have to do, and here's the key to really, really understanding the way that the tune works, you're going to have to learn 2 to 3 other interpretations of that same melody. Now, the cool thing is that most of these melodies that are really open to interpretation are the simpler melodies. So you should be able to do it fairly quickly, depending on kind of where you're at with your ear training and how quickly you can listen to something and figure it out on your instrument. But that's the real key. So start with the one that you're really, really excited about, where you love the interpretation of that particular melody, and then find 2 or 3 other versions and learn those exactly as well. And through this process, you're going to understand the differences between the different versions that you're learning from, but you will notice that there are a lot of similarities, and what's left over at the end of the day, the similarities between the different versions, is most likely going to be that core melody that you want to know at the end of the day. Now, here's the thing. You want to interpret the melodies in your own way, but you are going to end up sounding like these people that you have studied their playing. And there's just no way around that, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I highly, highly encourage that, okay? So After you get done with these, let's say 3 to 4 versions, you should have a pretty good idea of what constitutes that melody. And then you can do a couple of things. You can try to write it out yourself and just kind of boil it down to what you think the core melody is. Or at that point, I do think it's okay to go and look at the real book after you've done all that ear training and learning by ear first. So I do still own real books. I'm looking at a couple of them on my shelf right now, but I don't run to the real book as a first stop, right? I really want to use those ears. Check out a bunch of really cool artists. This also really helps with your transcribing, right? Your skills in transcription. So I think that this is going to be the best way to do this. And what I've done on the PDF this week is I have given you the name of 3 tunes that I think fall into this category. And what I've also done is I've created a Spotify playlist with like 5-6 versions of each one of these compositions as like kind of a one-stop shop where you can get started on this process. I want to make it as easy for you as possible. And then hopefully what I'm imagining is that once you have the process down and it's accessible and you can use the tools that I've given you, now you will follow this process when you get to the next tune that is open to interpretation, like these 3. All right. So make sure you go and check that out on Patreon and start to use this process. Pick a tune that you think is really open to interpretation and learn it. Learn it in this way. And let me know. Let me know what you think about it. Did it help? Did it not help? This might not be for everybody, but I've found that this is a great way for myself and a lot of my students to learn these tunes by ear and remember them forever, frankly. And that's what we're really after. So get started on this process right away. And what I'm going to do at the end of the episode here is I'm going to take the tune Alone Together, take the first A section, and I'm going to play it 3 times in a row. And I'm going to interpret it in very different ways. And I'm hoping what this will do is kind of drive the point home that these tunes do exist, and you will hear a lot of different interpretations of them, and that's okay. It can seem daunting at first, but I think if you follow this process, you'll really see a lot of success. So let me know if you have any questions. You can always get in touch with me on the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Community Facebook group, or you can email me at 10minutejazzlesson@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you, and I'm always game for helping you along in the process and answering any of the questions that you might have. So remember, go and grab the PDF. It will have the 3 tunes. It will have a Spotify playlist. And for the $5 patrons, I will also include backing tracks for all 3 of those tunes so you can test out your ability to play those melodies. So that's 10minutejazzlesson.com. Click on one of the Patreon banners and you get instant access to all of that stuff. All right. Hope you're all doing well out there. We are really making progress in our quest to be able to learn tunes in a predictable and complete fashion. And we're going to keep going with that next week. Hope you're all staying safe and healthy out there. And we will talk to you soon. Have a good one, everybody. Bye.